Good morning and welcome to today's press conference hosted by the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP. We will take questions today from the press. We ask that you use the raise hand function so that you may be recognized, or you may place questions in the Q&A. And we do ask that you announce your name as well as your media outlet. Following today's press conference, we will provide a video as well as our press release that will include our legislative agenda. And now I would like to introduce to you the president of the Virginia State Conference, NAACP, Reverend Cozy Bailey. Reverend Bailey was elected and assumed leadership in November of 2023. Reverend Bailey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, and welcome and thank you all for joining us this morning. I'd like to tell you that the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP has been actively involved in the political process of the Commonwealth of Virginia since our establishment in 1935. In order to achieve our vision of an inclusive community rooted in liberation where all persons can exercise their civil and human rights without discrimination, we continue the legacy of collaboration with our elected officials. We are specifically committed to creating and maintaining a society where Black people can enjoy equitable opportunities in a thriving community. We believe that our 2024 legislative agenda suggests some enhancements to some laws and statutes and maintenance of others is a significant step forward to achieving our vision if the General Assembly agrees with us. So again, I thank you for joining us this morning, and I now will introduce you and welcome you to speak and hear from our Political Action Chair, Ms. Gayleen Knoyton. Gayleen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Bailey. As he stated, my name is Gayleen Knoyton. I'm the Political Action Chair for the Virginia NAACP. And we are so excited about this session. We have many bills that we will be supporting and some bills that we won't be supporting as well. However, we want to make sure that we have full participation from everyone, our members and everyone to help us push our legislation through. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our legislative coordinator, Tyee Davenport, and she will give us our legislative agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, President Bailey, and thank you, Chairwoman Knoyton, for the opportunity to present our legislative agenda for 2024. As Gayleen said, that we are very much looking forward to this session, and we're looking forward to advocating a very robust legislative agenda for the Virginia NAACP that I believe stands for the values and goals and ideals that our members are asking for us to advocate for. And so we have 7 legislative agenda areas: education, environmental and climate justice, healthcare, housing, race and justice, workforce, labor, and economic empowerment, and last, voting rights and political representation. And I will go through all of these. These are high-level issues. They're not necessarily coinciding with an exact bill, but we will be advocating for bills and supporting bills that align with our agenda that I'm going to outline here. So first, beginning in the area of education, we believe in defending the teaching of America's history, which includes Black history, and we will support accurate interpretations of U.S. policies, social mores, and laws. We will advocate for developing and augmenting policies that ensure accountability of school employees whose actions and inaction contribute to racist school cultures. We will work with school administrators to determine why disproportionate numbers of Black students are more punitively disciplined than their white counterparts. We will advocate for increased counseling, mental health resources for students. We will advocate for clarifying the roles of school resource officers so that their training dealing with criminal behaviors is not misplaced and or used unnecessarily. We will work to increase understanding of literacy as a civil rights issue and advocate for laws that will ensure equity in this area. We will support the success of students with health and behavioral issues by not requiring that they fail courses for illness and or suspension. We will support school libraries that do not censor American history and culture. We will support the well-being of LGBTQ plus students and advocate for hiring and retention of anti-racist educators and administrators. And at last, prioritize funding to Virginia's HBCUs. And again, we've already seen a few bills that we will later identify as support for as we go throughout session. And so we are encouraged by some of the bills that we're already seeing that have already been filed. Next, in the area of environmental and climate justice, we will advocate for and provide research tools, educational materials, and strategies in adherence to the program directives of the NAACP Center for Environmental Climate Justice to support policies and programs in the Commonwealth, which will lead to clean car standards and zero emissions, the elimination of climate racism, ensure corporate responsibility and accountability, and a just transition to a clean energy economy for Black and all communities and all workers. In the area of healthcare, we will advocate for legislation that will result in the elimination of racial and ethnic inequities that exist within our healthcare system and that undermine communities of color, their life opportunities, and their ability to contribute fully to the common good. We will expand funding. We will work to expand funding to increase the professional capacity for treatment of and access to mental and emotional health services. And so again, mental health is a major priority in our agenda with the NAACP. In the area of housing, we will advocate for legislation that promotes housing stability and affordability, such as eviction protections and protection efforts, foreclosure protections, historic investments in housing in the Housing Trust Fund, local option for rent stabilization, Virginia Eviction Reduction Fund, extending the time for pay or quit, supporting a pilot program for first-time low-income homebuyers, local authority and returning local authority to residents, and directing the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development to conduct a statewide housing needs assessment. In the area of race and justice, we will advocate for smarter, results-based criminal justice policies to keep our communities safe. We advocate for drug addiction disorder to be treated as an illness and not as a criminal offense. We ask for judicial discretion in sentencing and an end to racial disparities at all levels of the system. Furthermore, we support common sense gun legislation that will have significant impact on reducing gun violence and saving lives. This includes comprehensive background checks on the sale of firearms, limitations on purchasing firearms, and a prohibition of selling and transporting assault weapons. We believe all of these measures will keep Virginians safe. And last, we will defend and expand the elimination of pretextual policing, which is racial profiling, and all law enforcement traffic stops. In the area of workforce, labor, and economic empowerment, we will advocate for policies and legislation that enhance the capacity of Black Virginians and other underserved groups through financial, economic education. Individual and community asset building, we will support individual and community asset building initiatives and also providing safe and affordable housing. Job training and a livable wage is very important to us, and we've seen bills on that, and diversity and inclusion in business hiring and inclusive procurement. And last, we want to encourage the continued monitoring of financial banking practices. And last, our last category, which is voting rights and political representation, we will continue to advocate for the enhancements that will increase voter access in Virginia. We will always support beginning pre-registration at the age of 16, which we believe leads to a lifelong which we believe will begin a lifelong habit of people voting. If you're pre-registering at age 16, we want to increase the number of young people that are able to vote. We're asking localities to hold mandatory Sunday voting during the early vote period. And last but most certainly not least, one of our flagship bills for this year is the restoration of voting rights to the formerly incarcerated. We know that House Senate Joint Bill 2, being carried by Senator Locke, as she's always carried every single year, is the constitutional amendment to restore rights, to automatically restore rights to the formerly incarcerated. So we will be fighting and working heavily to support that bill. And so that is our agenda as far as what we are supporting. Just a few words about a few other areas. We're obviously going to be supporting the constitutional amendment for reproductive rights. I believe that is House Senate Joint Resolution 1. We are wholeheartedly in support of that. We believe that Virginians spoke in this last election, and they believe that body autonomy is important. And also in the way of fighting back on the defense, we will vehemently work to defend any we will work to fight against any possible legislation that is going to limit any voting rights that we already have. So any attempts to decrease the early vote period, any attempts to add mandatory voter ID, we will be fighting vigorously against any of those types of bills that will continue to limit voting rights. And so with that, I will turn it, I guess, over to Karen for questions. Is that what we're doing?
Yes, and so what we will ask is that if there are questions from the press, please raise your hand, and so that we can open up your mic in order to ask your questions. And if you will also identify your name as well as your media outlet. Yes, Mr. Kuttner, you may unmute yourself.
Hey there. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Brad Kuttner, Radio IQ. Thanks for hosting us today. Could you speak more to the importance of the felon enfranchisement constitutional amendment? And I also heard from someone that there was bipartisan support on this in 2021. Any chance you've got a record of the Republicans who supported it, and or do you expect any bipartisan support this year?
I'll take it. But yeah. I do not recall. I don't know that I can remember what the bipartisan support was.
Okay.
For this in 21. I would have to go back and look. I'm not sure this year either what who on either side of the aisle are going to support it. Not speaking, partisanly. Obviously, the conditions exist now in the General Assembly that we feel favorable that this amendment will pass, but that is not a guarantee. So we don't know yet until we start looking at the bill who is going to support it on either side. But we feel good about it, but that nothing is a guarantee.
Thank you, Mr. Kuttner. Are there other questions this morning? Yes, I see a hand raised from 13 News Now. If you could please unmute yourself and please state your name for us.
This is Alex Littlehales from Channel 13 here in Hampton Roads. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, just wanted to follow up. You had just mentioned any legislation limiting voting access, and one bill that I had seen pre-filed in particular, that's just kind of following up on what you just said. There's a bill out there to reduce the absentee voting period from 45 to 30 days, that window. So is that kind of an example of sort of the legislation you're opposed to? And can you cite any other bills that you are pro or against, specifically regarding just election-related stuff, especially since we're going into a big election year? So I don't know if you'd seen that bill in particular, but is that kind of an example of what you're talking about?
Exactly. That is in fact that bill. We will fight against any attempts to decrease the early vote period. We believe that once Virginians enjoy a right, it does not make a lot of sense to try to take that right away. Virginians have enjoyed early voting, I believe the last 2-3 cycles, somebody correct me. And so now that Virginians are used to being able to go to the polls in 45 days, it does not make sense to try to decrease that in any way and take it away. We know it works. We know it increases access, and we will continue to fight to keep early voting and not decrease it. And there are a few bills. I did see a couple of voter ID bills as well. And once we see the full language on them, I cannot imagine us wanting to reinstate mandatory voter ID as now that we have enjoyed the privileges that we have now. We want to keep voting access as open as possible. And Galen and President Bailey, feel free to chime in.
I just want to say that this is democracy at work. We want to expand access, not limited at all. So that's really important. So this is definitely a bill that we will be against.
Thank you. Are there other questions? As I don't see any other hands raised. Oh, yes. Mr. Dodson, you may unmute yourself, please. Let us know your media outlet.
Hi there, Joe Dodson, Courthouse News Service. I appreciate y'all taking some time to speak with us. I'm just wondering, after in 2023, a really high profile death with Irvo Otanio, or excuse me, I don't want to mess up his last name, but I don't remember. How do you plan on increasing accountability for law enforcement?
Let me begin a response, and then Ms. Mallory or Ms. Knoyton can join in. So thank you for the question, Mr. Dodson, and I think you and all know that there are extreme complexities behind that particular incident. Uh, Accountability of law enforcement is one of those issues there. But there are also issues of collaboration between law enforcement and healthcare personnel. There are also issues about processes and procedures and availability of mental health care professionals to people who are suffering from those. So it is, and I'm sure that you recognize it is a lot more complex issue than just law enforcement accountability. But at the same time, accountability for our law enforcement officials and all people who provide service uh, and protection to our citizens is always important to us. And we will continue to strive and fight for accountability to ensure that our people, the people that were our primary constituents, are protected and receive all of the rights and privileges under the law. Ms. Knoyton or Ms. Mallory, would you like to add anything to that?
I think I think you answered it all, but go ahead, Tai.
Now, I'll just say I think that we were all heartbroken when we saw the video of Mr. Otieno. And I think as legislatively, we will look to support any legislation or any measures to expand compassionate mental health services and the collaboration between healthcare when sheriff's deputies are involved, and also the care that's given to the mental health personnel in our state-run facilities.
Let me just add one more thing. We want to ensure that the Marcus alert is in every locality. I mean, there was just a shooting in Suffolk, and the Marcus alert was implemented afterwards the next day. And so every locality should be implementing the Marcus alert where a police officer, when they go out to answer a call and they know that this person has mental health issues, that they have a mental health professional with them.
Thank you all. Ms. Shipman, you may unmute yourself and please just announce your media outlet. I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. Ms. Shipman Singleton, if you would like to put your question in the Q&A and we will answer that. We're just having a little bit of difficulty with your audio today. Are there other questions from the media today about the Virginia State Conference's 2024 legislative agenda? Okay, as I see no other hands or questions in the Q&A or oh yes, so Ms. Shipman Singleton's question is, what are our top 3 agenda items?
Well, I mean, again, we advocate for issues across the broad spectrum of policies and areas, but I would certainly say that the voting rights, the restoration of rights agenda, um, amendment is top right there, and that's because that is a long fight. That is a 3-year fight. So that's not just for 1 year. We've got to pass that 3 years in a row, these 2 sessions, and then after an election in 2025. So that I would put that in our top 3. I think advocating for our education and making sure that Virginians and our history is accurately taught in Virginia could be one of our top 3. And Ms. Knoyton or Reverend Bailey, I don't want to monopolize.
I think that also we will always advocate for women's reproductive rights, and juvenile criminal justice is really important as well, because the way that juveniles are being treated in the court system, I mean, it just needs to be fixed. Let me just say one thing. We will also advocate that DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is definitely stays in Virginia and is not diluted any way whatsoever. And
So,
also sensible gun laws.
so thank you for the question. And I think you can tell Ms. Shipman Singleton that it is difficult for the NAACP to identify a top 3. All of those issues are extremely important to us as we look at, again, since the NAACP in this Commonwealth since 1935, but as a national organization since 1909, has focused on political, economic, social, and educational rights for all people. That gives you the tint for what it is that we are trying to do. And tantamount to all of those things, of course, will be voting rights. The NAACP is legendary for our support of voting rights and expanding those rights to all people who fall under the ability to vote under the law. As you look back to 1954, you will see that education rights are extremely important to us. As you look at the things that have transpired since then, as both Ms. Mallory and Ms. Knoyton have detailed, all of those issues are extremely important to us. So our top 3 are all of those issues, which, will probably come out to 11 or 12. But thank you for that question. And let me highlight one thing that Ms. Mallory and Ms. Knoyton talked about. Ms. Mallory mentioned restoration of rights. Ms. Knoyton mentioned our fight to ensure that this administration and all administrations adhere to the statutes that require certain actions from the chief DEI officer of the Commonwealth. The NAACP at the Virginia State Conference level has been intimately involved in trying to work with their administration to ensure that they recognize what laws are in the books and those things that the administration is expected to do. And we continue to do that within this legislative session and external to it. So thank you again for a great question.
Thank you. Lexi, you may unmute yourself. Please announce your media outlet. Hello, Lexi. I see that you are unmuted. However, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay, hello all, and thank you for taking my question. So I speak for myself. I'm not part of any media. I keep hearing you guys speak a lot about education, and you highlighted mental health as well. So my concern is, how do we intertwine the mental health with the education in the school system, being that there are a lot of students these days that don't have that mental health coping skills, understanding how things are supposed to operate, being that we have adopted the Roosevelt ideology. So I'm just trying to understand, how can we incorporate the education system in addition to the mental health that these children are so in need of at this time and age.
And Ms. Kenoy, you want to start answering that?
Yes. One of the things that we want to ensure is that is funding for mental health in our schools and have resources to help our children. There will be some bills that are supposed to be coming into come up in the General Assembly session that we will support in terms of increase access and support. And access and resources for our students pertaining to mental health.
Let me add to that we know that there are other organizations that are allies and partners with the NAACP who have advocated for exactly what you just described. Professional educators throughout the Commonwealth have pointed out this challenge of dealing with mental health with our youth for the past 4 or 5 years, even preceding the pandemic, which exacerbated those challenges. There have been numerous recommendations to the administration and to the General Assembly to do a better job of allowing for funding, as Ms. Kenoyton just stated, to increase mental health professionals in the school level, the K through 12 level. And we, the NAACP, will continue to advocate and support those as well.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the media today? Yes, Mr. Dodson, you may unmute yourself.
Hi again. In the beginning, you mentioned there's plenty of legislation you'll support and some you won't. Any bills in particular that the organization has identified as bills you plan on combating?
Well, as Ms. Mallory said, anything that restricts opportunities for voting, including one that would decrease the number of early voting days we have, would be one that we would combat. I'm not sure, Ms. Mallory, whether we have identified any other bills that would fall into that category.
I have not, and the bills are still being populated into the legislative system. There are probably about 400, 500 bills that are in now. We're probably expecting another 1,000. And so it's going to take some time to go through to make sure we identify that. But certainly any and all attempts to decrease voting access, we will not be supporting that. We're going to fight against any and all attempts that will censor our history and not teach history adequately. Clearly, in the way of gun violence prevention, we will work to make sure that we are saving lives through common sense gun violence prevention legislation and fight against attempts to expand access to dangerous weapons and what have you. I didn't even mention the safe storage bill, which is going to be very important. That did not get through last year, and we all know the very tragic case that happened here. We have to make sure that we're keeping guns out of the hands of young people, and we will fight against any attempts that will endanger the lives of our young people.
And I just want to add one more thing to it. Housing is very important as well. And any bills that are going to promote eviction, we're definitely going to be against. We are going to definitely support prevention of eviction and protection. And so we're going to make sure that it happens. All of our issues work hand in hand. The RGGI, Regional Green Gas Initiative, we want to bring that back and strengthen it as well too. So environment, health, education, criminal justice, voting, all of these things fit hand in hand in terms of what our agenda is going to be.
Thank you all. And as I don't see any additional hand raised or questions in our Q&A, I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending today's press conference hosted by the Virginia State Conference NAACP. We will provide a copy of the recording as well as a full press statement following today's press conference. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to a busy General Assembly session.